Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life Unraveled. Cole Brennan stood at his kitchen window, watching his 16-year-old daughter Sophie practice her violin in the backyard gazebo. 22 years of marriage, 15 years running his successful construction company, and 10 years of military service before that. Everything had led to this moment of supposed contentment. The suburban dream in full bloom. But something had been eating at him for weeks. Amy's late nights at her real estate office had become routine. The secretive phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered the room. The way she flinched when he touched her shoulder unexpectedly. Cole's military training had taught him to trust his instincts, and every fiber of his being screamed that something was wrong. He'd survived 3 tours in Afghanistan by reading people, by noticing the details others missed. His wife of 22 years was exhibiting classic signs of deception. "Dad, dinner's ready," Sophie called from inside, her violin case in hand. She had Amy's blonde hair, but Cole's steel-gray eyes that had seen too much in Helmand Province to ever be truly naive again. Amy emerged from upstairs, her business suit perfectly pressed, her makeup freshly applied at 7 p.m. "Sorry, honey. I have to show a property to a client tonight. Big commission if this goes through." Cole studied her face as she kissed his cheek. The way her eyes darted away, the slight tremor in her voice. In Kandahar, those tells would have meant an IED ahead. Here, they meant his wife was lying to his face. "Which property?" he asked casually, cutting into his steak. "The Morrison place on Elm Street. You know, the colonial with the brick facade." Cole nodded, filing the information away. The Morrison house had sold 3 weeks ago. He'd seen the sold sign himself. Amy had just confirmed what he'd suspected. She was having an affair. After dinner, as Amy left for her appointment, Cole waited 30 minutes before making his move. Years of reconnaissance had taught him patience. He followed her silver BMW through downtown, keeping 3 cars back, watching as she pulled into the parking lot of O'Malley's bar. From his position across the street, Cole observed through the bar's large windows. Amy wasn't showing any house. She was wrapped in the arms of Vince Torino, a man Cole recognized from the local news, small-time crime, loan sharking, the kind of thug who preyed on desperate people. Vince Torino was everything Cole wasn't. Flashy gold chains, expensive suits that couldn't hide his soft physique, perfectly styled hair that probably took longer than Amy's. He ran numbers for some bigger fish and owned a garage that everyone knew was a front for stolen car parts. Cole watched them for an hour, documenting everything with his phone. The intimate touches, the passionate kisses, the way Amy laughed at Vince's jokes with a genuine happiness Cole hadn't seen directed at him in months. 22 years. 22 years of building a life together, of supporting her real estate dreams, of working 16-hour days to give her everything she wanted. And this was how she repaid him. But Cole Brennan didn't get mad. He got methodical. Chapter 2. Intelligence Gathering. Over the next 2 weeks, Cole became a ghost. His military training in surveillance and reconnaissance kicked in as he built a comprehensive picture of his wife's affair. Amy thought she was being careful, but she was an amateur playing against a professional. Cole installed tracking software on Amy's phone while she slept, using skills he'd learned from a tech specialist in his old unit. He discovered the affair had been going on for 8 months. 8 months of elaborate lies, fake real estate appointments, and weekend conferences that were actually romantic getaways. The deeper he dug, the more his respect for his wife evaporated. She hadn't just cheated, she'd been planning to leave him. Text messages revealed discussions about divorce settlements, about taking half of everything he'd built, about custody arrangements that would gut his relationship with Sophie. "Once we're together, you won't have to worry about money," read one message for Vince. "I'll take care of you and the girl." Cole's hands clenched as he read that message. The girl. Vince talked about Sophie like she was an inconvenience, a package deal he'd reluctantly accept. But the most revealing intelligence came from following Vince himself. The man was everything Cole had suspected, a small-time criminal with delusions of grandeur. Vince ran his operations out of his garage, surrounded by a crew of incompetent thugs who spent more time talking about their criminal activities than actually committing them. Cole observed from a distance as Vince met with his associates. Tommy Tank Morrison, a steroid-pumped enforcer with more muscle than brains. Joey Castellano, a wiry con man who specialized in insurance fraud. And Billy Harper, a paranoid drug dealer who jumped at shadows. What struck Cole most was how sloppy they were. In the military, operational security meant life or death. These criminals treated their illegal activities like a social club, discussing sensitive information in public, leaving evidence scattered around, trusting people they barely knew. It would be their downfall. Cole also discovered something that made his blood boil. Amy had been using their joint savings account to fund her affair. Expensive dinners, hotel rooms, even a weekend trip to Miami, all charged to the account Cole worked 18-hour days to fill. The final piece of intelligence came when Cole overheard a conversation between Amy and her sister, Rachel. Amy was planning to file for divorce within the month, claiming irreconcilable differences. She'd already consulted with Harvey Goldstein, the most aggressive divorce attorney in the city, known for destroying men in court. He'll never see it coming, Amy told Rachel over wine in their living room while Cole pretended to work in a study. 22 years, and he's been so focused on work that he hasn't noticed anything. I'll get the house, half the business, and primary custody. Sophie deserves better than a father who's never around. Never around. Cole had worked those long hours to build the life Amy claimed to want. Every 18-hour day was for their future, for Sophie's college fund, for the dream house Amy had insisted they needed. But Amy had chosen to see it as neglect rather than sacrifice. That night, after Amy fell asleep, Cole sat in his study and began planning. In Afghanistan, he'd learned that the best operations were the ones where the enemy destroyed themselves. You just had to create the right conditions and let their own weaknesses do the work. Vince Torino and Amy Brennan had just given him everything he needed to orchestrate their complete destruction. Chapter 3. The Threat. Cole's opportunity came sooner than expected. He was working late in his home office when the doorbell rang at 10:30 p.m. Through the security camera, he saw Vince Torino standing on his porch, flanked by Tank Morrison and Joey Castellano. Amy was upstairs with Sophie, helping with homework. Cole opened the door, his face neutral, giving nothing away. Cole Brennan. Vince's voice carried the artificial confidence of a man trying to intimidate someone he didn't know. That's right. We need to talk. Vince pushed past Cole into the living room without invitation, his two associates following. The smell of cheap cologne and cigarettes filled the space. Cole closed the door calmly and turned to face them. In Afghanistan, he'd dealt with warlords who commanded armies. These three criminals were children playing dress-up. I know about you and Amy, Cole said simply. Vince's confident demeanor faltered for just a moment before he recovered. Good. That saves us some time. Amy's told me all about you. The absent husband, too busy with work to notice his wife, was unhappy. Is that what she told you? She told me a lot of things. Vince moved closer, invading Cole's personal space in a classic intimidation tactic. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to make this divorce easy. Amy gets the house, half the business, and primary custody of the kid. You don't fight it, and everyone stays happy. Cole studied Vince's face. The overconfident smirk, the gold tooth that caught the light, the soft hands that had never done an honest day's work. And if I don't, Vince's expression darkened. Tank Morrison cracked his knuckles behind him, while Joey Castellano fingered something in his jacket pocket. Then things get complicated. Amy mentioned you have a daughter. Pretty girl, Sophie, right? 16 years old, takes violin lessons, walks home from school every day down Maple Street. Cole felt something cold settle in his chest. The carefully controlled fury that had kept him alive in combat zones began to build. She mentioned Sophie practices in that little gazebo in your backyard. Vince continued, stepping even closer. Real private back there. Lots of trees. No neighbors watching. Careful, Cole said quietly. But Vince was on a roll now, mistaking Cole's stillness for fear. Smart man like you probably has cameras, security systems. But accidents happen, you know? Systems fail. Sometimes teenage girls just disappear. Tank Morrison grinned stupidly. My specialty is making people disappear. Sign the divorce papers, giving her everything. Vince said, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a menacing whisper, or my boys will pay your daughter a visit. Cole just stared at him. In the silence that followed, he could hear Sophie's violin music drifting down from upstairs. Pachelbel's Canon, her favorite piece. The same piece Amy used to request when they were dating. Visit, Cole said finally. That's cute. But 10 years in the military taught me how to dismantle a man with just my thumbs. Vince stepped back instinctively as Cole stood up from where he'd been leaning against the doorframe. Cole was 6'2" and still carried himself with the ramrod posture of a career soldier. In the soft light of the living room, his scars from Afghanistan became visible, a thin line across his jaw from shrapnel, another along his forearm from a knife fight in Kabul. You threatening me? Vince asked, but his voice had lost its confident edge. I'm educating you, Cole replied. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. What mistake? Vince tried to laugh, but it came out forced. Cole smiled, and something in that expression made all three men take another step back. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just found prey. You threatened my daughter. The room went silent, except for Sophie's violin upstairs. Vince looked at his associates, realizing that his intimidation tactic had backfired spectacularly. Now, Cole continued, his voice conversational, you're going to leave my house. And then you're going to discover exactly what happens when you threaten a Green Beret's family. Green Beret? Joey Castellano whispered. Special Forces, 5th Group, Cole confirmed. 3 tours in Afghanistan. I've killed better men than you with improvised weapons. But don't worry, I'm not going to kill you. You're not. Tank Morrison looked confused. No, death would be merciful. Instead, I'm going to destroy everything you've ever cared about, piece by piece, until you beg me to put you out of your misery. Vince tried to salvage his authority. You can't touch us. We got connections, protection. From who? The Castellano family? They cut ties with Joey 2 years ago when he started using their name for his penny ante insurance scams. The Morrison crew? Tank here isn't related to the real Morrisons. He just uses their name to sound tough. Cole had done his homework. As for you, Vince, you're nothing but a wannabe who runs numbers for Tony Ricci. And Tony Ricci has been looking for an excuse to cut dead weight from his operation. The 3 men exchanged worried glances. Cole was revealing knowledge they hadn't expected him to possess. So here's what's going to happen, Cole continued. You're going to walk out that door and never come near my family again. Because if I see any of you within a mile of my daughter, if I hear you've so much as looked at her funny, I will end you. This ain't over, Vince said weakly. You're right, Cole agreed. It's just beginning. After they left, Cole stood in his living room for a long moment, listening to Sophie's music. Amy appeared at the top of the stairs. Who was that, honey? She asked innocently. Cole looked up at his wife, the woman who had betrayed him, who had brought danger into their home, who had exposed their daughter to criminals. Nobody important, he said. Just some people who made a very big mistake. Chapter 4. The Setup. Cole spent the next week setting his plan in motion. His first call was to Miguel Santos, his old platoon sergeant, who now ran a private security company in Miami. Miguel specialized in corporate investigations and had connections throughout law enforcement. Cole, you old bastard, Miguel's voice boomed through the phone. Please tell me you're calling because you want a real job instead of playing with construction equipment. I need a favor, Miguel. Information gathering on some local criminals. Personal or business? Personal. They threatened Sophie. The tone changed immediately. Miguel had been there when Cole received the news about Sophie's birth, had seen the photos Cole carried through 3 deployments. What do you need? Cole provided Vincent Torino's full name and the names of his associates. Within 48 hours, Miguel had compiled comprehensive files on all 3 men. Their criminal records, their associates, their weaknesses, their fears. Tank Morrison had a gambling problem that had put him in debt to several loan sharks. Joey Castellano was skimming money from his insurance fraud schemes to support a cocaine habit. And Vince Torino had been stealing from Tony Ricci's operation for months, believing he was too smart to get caught. But Cole wasn't just gathering intelligence on the criminals. He was also investigating Amy. Through a private investigator Miguel recommended, Cole discovered that Amy's affair with Vince had begun when Vince hired her to sell property, a property he'd acquired through questionable means. Amy had ignored the red flags because she was attracted to the danger Vince represented. More damaging, Cole learned that Amy had been feeding Vince information about Cole's business. She'd given Vince access to Cole's client list, his project schedules, even his banking information. Information that could be used for theft, extortion, or worse. Amy hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She committed corporate espionage. The second phase of Cole's plan involved his construction company. Brennan Construction had contracts throughout the city, including several projects in the neighborhoods where Vince operated his illegal activities. Cole began redirecting some of his legitimate operations to put pressure on Vince's territory. A new construction project required temporary street closures right outside Vince's garage. The increased police presence for traffic control made it impossible for Vince to conduct his usual illegal activities. Another project required extensive utility work that accidentally disrupted phone and internet service to 3 buildings where Vince ran his numbers operation. Each disruption was completely legal and appeared coincidental, but they cost Vince thousands of dollars in lost revenue. The third phase involved psychological warfare. Cole began leaving subtle signs that he was watching. Vince would find his car parked in exactly the same spot where he'd left it, but with the mirrors adjusted differently. Joey Castellano discovered that someone had been in his apartment. Nothing was stolen, but his furniture was arranged slightly differently. Tank Morrison woke up one morning to find all his trash cans perfectly aligned and his morning newspaper folded into precise military corners. The message was clear: we can reach you anywhere, anytime. Cole also activated his network of military contacts. Former Special Forces soldiers now worked in various capacities throughout the city: police officers, federal agents, private security, corporate executives. When Cole Brennan called in favors, people listened. Detective Ray Morgan, Cole's former squad mate, began taking a special interest in the activities around Vince's garage. ATF agent Lisa Parks started asking questions about some of Vince's associates. IRS investigator David Chun launched an audit of Vince's business records. Each contact was legitimate law enforcement activity based on genuine suspicious behavior. Cole was simply directing attention to activities that deserve scrutiny. But the most important phase of Cole's plan involved Amy herself. Cole began documenting everything. Every lie, every secret meeting, every dollar she spent on her affair. He installed hidden cameras in their home, recorded her phone conversations, and tracked her movements. He was building a case that would destroy her in any divorce proceeding. More importantly, he was setting up a confrontation that would force Amy and Vince to reveal their true natures. Cole scheduled a surprise romantic dinner for their anniversary, knowing Amy had planned to meet Vince that night. He made reservations at Antonio's, their favorite restaurant, and bought expensive wine and roses. When Amy tried to cancel, claiming she had to work late, Cole smiled and said, "No problem. I'll bring dinner to your office." The panic in Amy's eyes was delicious. She was forced to cancel her meeting with Vince and sit through a dinner where Cole acted like the loving husband he'd been for 22 years. Every compliment, every gentle touch, every shared memory was a knife twist, because Amy knew she was living a lie. But Cole wasn't done. As they shared dessert, he mentioned casually that he'd been thinking about early retirement. "I want to spend more time with you and Sophie," he said. "Maybe we could take that European vacation you've always wanted." Amy's face went white. A closer, more attentive husband was the last thing she wanted. "I thought you loved your work," she said weakly. "I love my family more," Cole replied, taking her hand. "You and Sophie are everything to me. I'd do anything to protect you." The word protect carried special emphasis, and Amy understood the subtext. Cole was telling her that he knew about the threat to Sophie, that he was aware of the criminal element she'd brought into their lives. That night, Cole listened as Amy made a frantic phone call to Vince, explaining that Cole was becoming suspicious, that they needed to be more careful. He's not suspicious, Cole whispered to himself in his study. He knows everything. The trap was set. Now he just had to wait for his prey to walk into it. Chapter 5. Pressure Points. Vince Torino was beginning to feel the heat. 3 weeks had passed since his visit to Cole Brennan, and everything in his life was falling apart. The police had raided his garage twice based on anonymous tips about stolen car parts. They'd found nothing, because Cole had made sure Vince was warned in advance through carefully placed rumors. But the raids had spooked Vince's customers and cost him significant business. His numbers operation was hemorrhaging money due to constant construction delays that blocked access to his key locations. The IRS was asking uncomfortable questions about his tax returns. And worst of all, Tony Ricci was starting to notice the discrepancies in the money Vince was supposed to be collecting. Tank Morrison had become a paranoid wreck, convinced that someone was watching him constantly. He'd started carrying a gun everywhere, which made him sloppy and dangerous. Joey Castellano was stealing more money to support his increasing cocaine habit, driven by stress and fear. But Cole's masterpiece was the psychological campaign he'd launched against Amy. Every morning, Amy found her coffee prepared exactly the way she liked it. Her car was warmed up in winter. Her favorite music was playing when she got in. Cole brought her flowers for no reason, complimented her appearance, and treated her like a beloved wife. The guilt was eating her alive. She couldn't meet Vince without feeling like Cole somehow knew. She couldn't lie to her husband without seeing the hurt in Sophie's eyes when she missed another family dinner. The weight of her deception was crushing her spirit. Cole observed his wife's deterioration with clinical detachment. In Afghanistan, he learned that psychological pressure was often more effective than physical force. Amy was breaking down exactly as he'd planned. The breaking point came when Sophie approached Cole one evening as he worked in his study. "Dad, is Mom okay?" Sophie asked. Her 16-year-old face creased with worry. "She seems really sad lately." Cole looked up at his daughter, blonde hair in a ponytail, wearing the Columbia University sweatshirt he'd bought her for her birthday. Sophie was everything good in his life, and Amy was putting her in danger by associating with criminals. "Mom's going through a difficult time," Cole said carefully. "Sometimes adults make choices that complicate their lives. Are you and Mom going to get divorced?" The question hit Cole like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on his plans for revenge that he hadn't considered how this was affecting Sophie. "Do you want us to get divorced?" he asked. Sophie shook her head quickly. "I want us to be a family. But if you and Mom aren't happy..." Cole pulled his daughter into a hug. "Sophie, I need you to know something. No matter what happens between your mother and me, I will always be your father. I will always protect you, and I will never abandon you." "I know, Dad." But as Sophie left his study, Cole realized that his daughter was already a casualty of Amy's choices. Even if he destroyed Vince and exposed Amy's infidelity, Sophie would still lose the family structure she'd known her entire life. The realization hardened Cole's resolve. Amy and Vince had forced this situation. Now, they would pay the full price. Cole's next move was to force a direct confrontation between Vince and Tony Ricci. Using his private investigator, Cole arranged for Tony to receive detailed financial records showing exactly how much money Vince had been skimming from the operation. The meeting took place at Rossi's restaurant, a neutral location where Tony conducted business. Cole observed from a construction site across the street, using high-powered surveillance equipment. Through the restaurant's windows, he watched as Tony confronted Vince with the evidence. Vince tried to explain, gesturing frantically, his face flushed with panic. Tank Morrison and Joey Castellano sat at a nearby table, looking increasingly nervous. Cole couldn't hear the conversation, but he didn't need to. Tony's body language said everything. The older man's face was stone, his hands folded calmly on the table. When Vince finished his explanations, Tony said something brief, then stood and left the restaurant. Vince sat alone at the table for 10 minutes, his head in his hands. Cole's phone buzzed with a text message from Miguel. Tony Ricci just put a price on Vincent Torino's head. $50,000 for the money he stole, plus interest. Word is already spreading. The trap was closing. That evening, Cole prepared for the final phase of his plan. He'd systematically destroyed Vince's criminal organization, turned his boss against him, and driven him to desperation. Now it was time to force Vince into a mistake that would eliminate him permanently. Cole sent an anonymous message to Vince. Cole Brennan knows everything. He has evidence of your relationship with his wife and your threats against his daughter. He's planning to turn you over to Tony Ricci tomorrow night. Your only chance is to eliminate the threat first. The message was designed to provoke exactly the response Cole wanted. A desperate man would make desperate choices, and Cole would be ready. Chapter 6. The Hunt Begins. Vince received the anonymous message at 2 a.m. while hiding in a seedy motel outside the city. The walls were thin, the carpet stained, and the smell of desperation hung in the air like smoke. Tank Morrison snored on one bed, while Joey Castellano paced nervously by the window, tweaking on cocaine and paranoia. "We're dead men," Joey muttered, pulling back the curtain to scan the parking lot for the 10th time in an hour. "Tony's got people looking for us everywhere." Vince stared at the message on his phone. Cole Brennan had orchestrated their downfall with military precision. Every business disruption, every police raid, every piece of evidence that had reached Tony Ricci, it all traced back to the quiet construction worker who'd smiled at them in his living room 3 weeks ago. "I told you we should have handled him immediately," Tank said, waking up and cracking his knuckles. "Should have grabbed the daughter, sent a message." "Shut up," Vince snapped. But even as he said it, he knew Tank was right. Cole Brennan had been 10 steps ahead from the beginning. Vince's phone buzzed with another message, this one from Amy. "Cole knows about us. He's been watching me, recording my calls. We need to run." But Vince couldn't run. Tony Ricci had connections from Miami to Boston. There was nowhere to hide from a $50,000 bounty. His only option was to eliminate Cole Brennan before Brennan could deliver him to Tony. "We're going back," Vince announced. "Back where?" Joey asked. "To finish what we started. Brennan thinks he's smart, but he made one mistake. He's not dealing with street criminals anymore. He declared war on us." Tank Morrison grinned, his steroid-enhanced muscles flexing as he stood. "Now you're talking. What's the plan?" Vince looked at the anonymous message again. Cole was planning to turn him over to Tony tomorrow night. That gave him less than 24 hours to act. "We grab a daughter," Vince said. "Use her as leverage to force Brennan to call off Tony. Then we disappear with Amy and enough money to start over somewhere Tony can't reach us." "What about Brennan?" Joey asked. Vince's expression darkened. "Brennan dies. Slowly. He's caused me enough problems." What Vince didn't know was that Cole had anticipated this exact response. The anonymous message was bait, designed to force Vince into making a move that would justify everything Cole planned to do next. Cole sat in his study at 3 a.m., monitoring phone calls and text messages through the surveillance network he'd established. Every communication between Vince, Amy, and Vince's associates was being recorded. Cole knew about the motel, knew about their desperation, and knew exactly when they would make their move. Amy's message to Vince had been particularly revealing. She was willing to abandon her daughter and run away with a criminal rather than face the consequences of her choices. That single text message eliminated any remaining guilt Cole felt about what he was planning. Cole activated his security protocols. Motion sensors throughout the property, cameras with night vision, silent alarms connected directly to his phone. Sophie's room had additional protection, reinforced door, window sensors, and a panic button that would bring Cole running. But Cole wasn't planning to wait for Vince to make the first move. At 6 a.m., Cole kissed Sophie goodbye as she left for school. "I love you, sweetheart. Remember what we talked about yesterday?" The day before, Cole had given Sophie a special phone with GPS tracking and a direct line to Detective Ray Morgan. He'd also arranged for 2 of his former military colleagues to provide discreet security during school hours. Sophie thought it was paranoia. Cole knew it was necessity. Amy left for her real estate appointments an hour later, not knowing that Cole was tracking her every movement. She drove straight to the motel where Vince was hiding. Cole followed at a distance, using techniques he'd learned in Afghanistan. When Amy's car disappeared into the motel parking lot, Cole positioned himself where he could observe the entire location. Through high-powered binoculars, he watched Amy embrace Vince in front of room 237. The desperation in their body language was obvious. Tank Morrison and Joey Castellano loaded bags into a stolen car, preparing to run. But they wouldn't get the chance. Cole placed a call to Detective Ray Morgan. "Ray, I got a tip about Vincent Torino's location. He's holed up at the Sunset Motel, room 237, with 2 associates and a stolen vehicle." "How do you know about the stolen vehicle?" Ray asked. "Because I've been tracking these bastards for weeks. They threatened my daughter, Ray. I want them in custody." Ray Morgan had served 2 tours in Iraq before becoming a police officer. He understood the bond between soldiers and the lengths they would go to protect their families. "Give me 30 minutes, Ray said. "And Cole? Stay away from there. Let's handle this." But Cole had no intention of staying away. He wasn't planning to interfere with the police operation. He was planning to ensure that Vince Torino never got the chance to threaten Sophie again. As sirens wailed in the distance, Cole moved closer to the motel. Through his surveillance equipment, he watched Vince's panic as the police surrounded the building. Tank Morrison tried to run and was tackled by 3 officers. Joey Castellano attempted to flush evidence down the toilet, but was arrested before he could destroy everything. And Amy Brennan stood in the parking lot in handcuffs, finally facing the consequences of her choices. But Vince Torino had escaped. Cole spotted him climbing out a bathroom window, moving toward the woods behind the motel. The police were focused on the main building and hadn't seen his escape route. Cole smiled. He'd been hoping for exactly this opportunity. The hunt was about to begin. Chapter 7: Predator and Prey. The woods behind the Sunset Motel stretched for miles, dense with oak and pine trees that had survived suburban development. Cole had scouted this terrain weeks earlier, knowing that desperate prey often fled to the wilderness. Vince Torino crashed through the underbrush like an amateur, leaving a trail that a blind man could follow. Every broken branch, every disturbed pile of leaves, every panicked footprint in the soft earth marked his passage. Cole moved through the same terrain like a ghost. Special Forces training had taught him to become one with his environment. His breathing was controlled, his footsteps silent, his camouflage clothing blending perfectly with the forest shadows. In Afghanistan, these skills had kept him alive through countless night operations. Today, they would help him end a threat to his family. Vince was running toward the old quarry, probably hoping to find a road on the other side. What he would find instead was Cole Brennan waiting for him. Cole used parallel movement, staying 50 yards to Vince's left while matching his pace. Through the trees, he could hear Vince's labored breathing, his muttered curses as he stumbled over roots and rocks. The man was soft, unprepared for this kind of physical exertion. When Vince stopped to rest against a large boulder, Cole moved closer. He could have taken Vince easily, a sleeper hold from behind, and the threat would be neutralized. But Cole wanted Vince to understand the hopelessness of his situation first. Cole picked up a small stone and threw it into the trees 30 feet to Vince's right. The sound of the impact sent Vince spinning in panic, his eyes wide with terror. "Who's there?" Vince called out, his voice cracking. Cole remained silent, invisible among the shadows. Vince pulled out a pistol, a cheap .38 that probably hadn't been cleaned in years. His hands shook as he pointed it randomly at the trees. "I know you're out there, Brennan." Vince shouted, "Come out and face me like a man." Cole threw another stone, this time behind Vince. The man spun again, nearly falling as his legs tangled. "You want to play games?" Vince screamed. "I'll burn down your whole world. I'll kill your precious daughter and make you watch." That was the last mistake Vincent Torino would ever make. Cole emerged from the tree line like death itself, moving with deadly purpose. Vince saw him and raised the pistol, but Cole was already inside his effective range. The gun flew from Vince's hand as Cole struck his wrist with surgical precision. Vince tried to throw a punch, but Cole caught his arm and twisted, driving Vince to his knees with a joint lock that threatened to snap bone. "You just threatened my daughter again," Cole said conversationally. "Wait, please." Cole struck a pressure point on Vince's neck, temporarily paralyzing his vocal cords. Vince's mouth moved, but no sound emerged. "For weeks, I've watched you destroy yourself," Cole continued, maintaining the arm lock while Vince struggled helplessly. "I've watched you lose your business, your boss, your freedom. All because you couldn't resist threatening a 16-year-old girl. Cole released the pressure point, allowing Vince to speak. I wouldn't actually. Vince gasped. No, you would. That's what makes you dangerous. Cole's voice remained calm, almost clinical. You're a predator who picks on the innocent because you're too weak to face real opposition. Cole applied pressure to another joint, sending waves of agony through Vince's shoulder. Please, Vince begged. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. You're right about that. But Cole didn't kill Vincent Torino. That would have been too simple, too clean. Instead, he systematically disabled the man. A calculated strike to the knee that would require surgery and leave him with a permanent limp. Pressure point attacks that would cause chronic pain for years. Nerve damage that would affect his grip strength permanently. When Cole was finished, Vince lay on the forest floor, conscious but broken. You're going to crawl back to civilization, Cole said. You're going to turn yourself into the police and confess to everything. The threats against my family, the stolen money from Tony Ricci, all of it. Why would I do that? Cole showed Vince his phone, displaying a video recording of their entire conversation in the woods. Because if you don't, this recording goes to Tony Ricci. And I think we both know how Tony handles people who threaten families. Vince's face went white with understanding. But I'm giving you a choice, Cole continued. Cooperate with the police, testify against your associates, and you'll get protective custody in prison. Refuse, and you'll be on the streets with Tony's people looking for you. Cole stood, looking down at the broken man who had dared to threaten his daughter. Choose wisely, Vincent. It's the last choice you'll ever make as a free man. Cole disappeared into the woods, leaving Vince to contemplate his future. Within an hour, Vince would drag himself to the nearest road and flag down a passing motorist. Within 2 hours, he would be in police custody, begging for protective custody and offering to testify against everyone he'd ever worked with. But Cole's work wasn't finished. He still had to deal with Amy. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Amy Brennan sat in the county jail's visitor room, her orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the designer clothes she'd worn just 24 hours earlier. Her bail had been set at $500,000, far beyond what her real estate commissions could cover, and Cole had frozen their joint accounts pending the investigation. Cole entered the room wearing his best suit, carrying a briefcase that contained the evidence that would destroy her life. He looked like a successful businessman visiting his attorney, not a husband confronting his cheating wife. Cole, Amy said, relief flooding her voice. Thank God you're here. This is all a misunderstanding. I can explain everything. Cole sat across from her, his expression neutral. Please do. Vince told me he was a legitimate businessman. I had no idea he was involved in criminal activities. When I found out, I was scared to leave him. He threatened me, threatened Sophie. Cole opened his briefcase and removed a tablet computer. On the screen was a video compilation of Amy and Vince together. Passionate kisses, intimate dinners, weekend getaways. This is from 8 months ago, Cole said, showing Amy footage of her and Vince in Miami. 3 months before Vince ever made any threats. Amy's face crumbled as she watched herself betraying 22 years of marriage. You've been investigating me, she whispered. I've been protecting my family, Cole corrected, from a woman who brought criminals into our home and put our daughter in danger. Cole showed her another video, audio recordings of her conversations with Vince, including discussions about divorce settlements and custody arrangements. You plan to take everything, Cole said. The house, the business, Sophie. You are going to destroy the life I built and call it justice. Cole, please. You gave Vince access to my business information. Client lists, project schedules, banking details. Do you have any idea how many people you put at risk? Amy stared at the evidence of her betrayal, finally understanding the magnitude of her choices. What happens now, she asked. Cole leaned back in his chair. Vincent Torino is in protective custody, cooperating with federal authorities. He's confessed to everything. The threats against Sophie, the stolen money from Tony Ricci, the extortion attempts. He's also provided detailed information about your role in his criminal activities. My role? I didn't. You provided material support to a criminal organization. You laundered money through fake real estate transactions. You committed conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to extortion. Cole showed her another document. This is a plea agreement the prosecutor is offering. 15 years in federal prison, eligible for parole in 7 years if you cooperate fully. Amy's hand shook as she read the legal documents. 15 years? Sophie will be 31 when I get out. If you get out, Cole corrected. The alternative is a trial where all of this evidence becomes public record. Your affair, your criminal activities, the threats against Sophie. The prosecutor estimates you'd get 25 to 30 years. You're my husband, Amy said desperately. You're supposed to protect me. Cole's expression hardened. I protected you for 22 years. I worked 18-hour days to give you everything you wanted, and you repaid me by betraying our family and putting our daughter in danger. What about Sophie? She needs her mother. Sophie needs protection from her mother, Cole replied. You chose Vince Torino over your own daughter. You chose criminal money over legitimate success. You chose deception over trust. Cole stood to leave. The prosecutor needs an answer by tomorrow. Cole, wait, Amy called out. What happens to us? To our marriage? Cole turned back to face her. There is no us. There is no marriage. You destroyed both when you decided to betray everything we built together. I made a mistake. No, Cole interrupted. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or bouncing a check. You made a choice. You chose to have an affair. You chose to steal from our accounts. You chose to put Sophie in danger. Every decision was deliberate. Cole gathered his papers and headed for the door. You'll never see Sophie again except through prison glass, he said without looking back. That's the price of betrayal. Amy, sobbing, followed him down the corridor, but Cole felt nothing. In Afghanistan, he learned that survival sometimes required cutting away infected tissue to save the patient. Amy had become an infection in their family, and she had to be removed. The next morning, Amy signed the plea agreement. Chapter 9, Justice Served. 6 months later, Cole stood in Judge Harrison's courtroom watching Amy receive her sentence. 15 years in federal prison, just as the plea agreement specified. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her choices. Vincent Torino had received 25 years after his cooperation deal fell through. Despite his testimony against Tony Ricci's organization, federal prosecutors had discovered additional crimes that voided his agreement. He would die in prison, exactly as Cole had planned. Tank Morrison got 10 years for weapons charges and assault. Joey Castellano received 12 years for fraud and drug trafficking. Cole's methodical documentation had provided prosecutors with enough evidence to dismantle their entire criminal network. Sophie sat beside Cole in the courtroom, now 17 and stronger than ever. She'd struggled with her mother's betrayal initially, but Cole's unwavering support had helped her heal. She was accepted to Columbia University on early admission, planning to study law. Dad, Sophie whispered as Amy was led away in shackles. Do you think she'll ever understand what she did wrong? Cole watched his ex-wife disappear through the courthouse door. Understanding requires accepting responsibility. Your mother has spent 6 months blaming everyone except herself. Do you hate her? Cole considered the question carefully. I don't hate her, Sophie. Hate requires emotional investment, and I have none left for her. She made her choices, and now she's facing the consequences. As they left the courthouse, Cole reflected on the past year. He'd systematically destroyed everyone who had threatened his family, using their own weaknesses against them. Vince's greed, Amy's selfishness, Tank's stupidity, Joey's addiction, all had contributed to their downfall. Brennan Construction had thrived during the chaos. With Amy's criminal associates eliminated and her corporate espionage exposed, Cole had secured new contracts worth millions. Sophie's college fund was overflowing, and their future was secure. More importantly, Cole had sent a message that would protect Sophie for years to come. In certain circles, the story of Vincent Torino's downfall had become legend. A small-time criminal had threatened Cole Brennan's daughter and ended up destroying himself and everyone around him. Nobody would make that mistake again. Sophie adjusted her Columbia University sweatshirt as they walked to their car. Dad, Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Mom had just been honest with you from the beginning. Cole opened the car door for his daughter. Honesty requires courage, and your mother chose the easy path. She wanted excitement without consequences, pleasure without responsibility. Will you ever remarry? I'm focused on being your father right now. That's the most important job I'll ever have. As they drove home, Cole's phone buzzed with a text from Miguel Santos. Saw the news about the sentencing. How does it feel to have your family safe again? Cole typed back, like mission accomplished. That evening, Cole found Sophie practicing violin in the backyard gazebo, the same gazebo where Vince had threatened to harm her. She was playing Pachelbel's canon, the piece Amy used to request, but now belonged to Sophie alone. Cole sat on the porch steps, listening to his daughter's music and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. For the first time in months, his family was truly safe. In Afghanistan, Cole had learned that some battles were won not through firepower, but through patience, planning, and the willingness to do whatever necessary to protect the innocent. The war for his family's safety had been fought on multiple fronts: legal, psychological, physical, and he had emerged victorious. Vincent Torino would spend the rest of his life in a concrete cage, his body broken, his spirit destroyed. Amy would serve 15 years, losing the best years of her life and any relationship with her daughter. Tank Morrison and Joey Castellano would waste away in federal prison. Their criminal careers ended permanently. Cole Brennan had given them all exactly what they deserved. Justice wasn't always served in courtrooms by judges and juries. Sometimes it was delivered by a father protecting his family, using skills learned in the service of his country. Sophie finished her piece and looked over at her father. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know." As the stars appeared in the darkening sky, Cole made a silent promise to the universe. Anyone who threatened his daughter would face the same fate as Vincent Torino. There would be no mercy, no forgiveness, no second chances. Cole Brennan never forgot, and he never forgave. The price of betrayal had been paid in full. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.